Tribe, Book 2, Todd Mills Mystery. Author, R.D. Zimmerman. Publisher, Scrib Pub, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 18. "You saw the note, Todd," said Janice flatly, now seated on her living room couch, a blanket draped over her shoulders, both hands clutching a mug of steaming coffee. "We weren't supposed to call the police." "I didn't call the cops. I called Rollins. That's all." "He is the police." "No, he's my boyfriend. And your friend, too, for that matter. He's family, Janice. I just want to do what they say. I don't want anyone to get hurt. I don't want to complicate things." "It's too late for that," said Todd as he began to pace in front of the four arching windows of her living room. "What do you call these bruises on my side or those marks on your wrists?" "Todd, the baby. I just don't want anything to happen to her. I don't know what I'll... What the hell are you saying? She's already been kidnapped." He shook his head, trying to make sense of this all. "Or maybe I should say she's been re-kidnapped. I don't get any of this. I just hope she's okay, that he hasn't already hurt her." Reminded of the blood they'd found in the snow, he said, "Me too." Todd looked out one of the windows but saw nothing. Rollins was on his way, but who knew how long it'd taken this storm, and who knew what the hell they'd do after he got here. Touching the painful bruises on his side, Todd glanced anxiously about the living room. With his tall, beamed ceiling, he shuffled across the light brown carpeting, stopped near an overstuffed chair. What a mess. Why the hell had she kept this from him? "Janice, I can't believe you didn't tell me about any of this," he said, unable to hide the anger in his voice. "I mean, that's what I wanted to talk about tonight." "Well, I wish you told me earlier. Like sometime within the last decade or two?" He shook his head, clenched the back of his head with his right hand. "We're talking about something that happened, what was it, over 20 years ago? It's just so complicated." "Obviously." "But Todd..." "Janice, I might not only have fathered your kid, but I'm also one of your best friends, aren't I?" "Of course you are, but I couldn't tell you back then. I couldn't tell anyone. You just don't understand." "No, I guess I don't." "Please," she said, pulling the blanket tight around her and closing her eyes. "I can't talk about it now." "You can't talk about it now? Now? You secretly had a child when we were in college, and you never told me that I might be his father? And you don't want to fucking talk about it? And now that kid's daughter has been kidnapped? And what, we're supposed to sit around a fire and do a crossword puzzle or something? Gee, doesn't that sound nice and fun?" He slapped his forehead with his right hand. "What's happened to you, Janice? Are you crazy? Have you lost your mind?" "Todd..." "Here, I thought you were so open and honest, the epitome of self-awareness and integrity," he said, raising his hands. "But you're nothing more than the original closet case, aren't you?" "Stop it!" she demanded, her eyes brimming with tears. "Why, is there something else? Don't tell me you've got more skeletons in there. Twins, maybe? Or perhaps I've got triplets? And if I am the chief, just tell me how big is my tribe." "Shut up!" she shouted. "Oh, you mean I'm supposed to just forget that I might have reproduced and my genes are out there running around?" "Oh, Todd," she sobbed. "Please, not now. We'll talk about it later. I'll tell you everything. I want to. I need to, but I just can't get into it right now." A Kleenex to her eyes, she glanced toward the front windows. "If anything happens to that child, I'll kill myself." Todd turned around, felt a stab of pain in his side, and stared outside into the dark night. "Yes, the baby." "Of course," he muttered. Janice's granddaughter was out there. His granddaughter as well? He shook his head, for it was a loop and a twist he just couldn't make. Couldn't comprehend a few hours ago he'd been thinking he was glad he didn't have kids. And now he might not only have a son, but a granddaughter as well. It was possible, wasn't it? Of course, and he shook his head, for he was just so confused, and none of this made any sense. You didn't really go to Europe, did you? He asked. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. What? Back in college. What was it, our junior year? You were supposed to have gone to France to study. Aix-en-Provence. Something like that. And then Greece too, wasn't it? But you never went, did you? You didn't even leave the country, did you? No. You took off that semester to have a baby. She nodded. Right. When did you have him? August. He was a few weeks early. And then you gave him up for adoption. She stared at her lap. Yes. You gave him up, and then by fall you were back in school as if nothing had happened. You came back all smiles, telling everyone that you'd been off gallivanting around Europe for 7 or 8 months. Oh, and that you were first and foremost a dyke. She sat there in silence, his words like daggers of guilt and shame cutting at her, slicing, ripping, tearing. Todd watched her, saw those long concealed events, all finally boiling to the surface and burn across her face. Her voice barely audible, she said, You don't have any idea what I was going through. How hard it was. How awful. He turned away, walked across the room, and stopped next to a bookcase. That period of his life was coming into true focus. It was as if he'd finally found the correct pair of glasses to look back through time, and he was finally seeing it clearly, able to make sense of what had happened and why. We dated that fall before you left. We started going out in September, and we were little boyfriend and girlfriend for a while there. It was pretty fun, too. Todd, that was so long ago. But he couldn't stop himself. We made it almost all the way to Christmas break, of course. You remember, don't you? There was the Christmas party at your sorority, and then we slipped upstairs and did it. Screwed, if you know what I mean. Fucked. Todd, stop it. Would you? You're being a real asshole. I went up to your room. It was right before Christmas break, just a day or two. I still think of that night. Every time I hear Carly Simon. God, I was so scared. And then we crawled into bed, and it just sort of happened after that. We hardly saw each other. Right, she agreed sadly. The question popped out of his mouth. So, if I'm not the father of your kid, who is? Oh, shit, Todd. Were you seeing someone else? God, that sounds so suburban, so middle class. Well, I'd like to know. Forget it. But you were screwing around on me, weren't you? I can't believe we're having this conversation. A queen and a dyke talking about cheating on each other. Janice, we were dating at the time. I really liked you. Suddenly she was on her feet, her fury erupting seemingly out of nowhere, and her finger pointing at him. How dare you? How dare I what? Todd, you asshole! How dare you talk to me about cheating? For your information, I went out west right after I left Northwestern, and I did have sex with some guy a couple of days after we did, she said. But would you please stop pretending to be the pure one? Oh, Christ, he thought, turning away. She knows. God, when it comes right down to it, you're just another fucking guy with his own fucking double standards. It must be testosterone. You get a dose of that stuff and you think you can put your dick any way you want and it doesn't matter. There aren't any consequences. She shook her head. You were screwing around too, and you don't tell me you weren't. He hesitated and then muttered, So you know about Pat, she said with great emphasis as she glared at Todd. Sure I do. I know that you two guys had sex a few times while we were dating, which explains a lot. Namely, why you were scared to screw me. Shit. Todd turned away, shaking his head in shame. He tried to say something, but his mouth was so dry he couldn't speak. He cleared his throat. I'm sorry, Janice. I... Oh, so you have a complicated story, too. Yeah, but... Nice and sordid, but you don't want to talk about it tonight, right? She taunted. Janice, please? Please what? Please let me have my own double standards? Please let me be a hypocrite? Or what? He couldn't do this. He couldn't fight this battle. Ooh, he began, his voice faint. Who told you? Who do you think? Pat! What? Gasped Todd, suddenly looking up at her. When? Let's just say I knew by that Christmas. At this time, all these years, the secret had been burning within Todd like a smoldering fire. That little bastard. Todd had kept up his part of the bargain. He hadn't told a soul, and here Pat had gone and told Janice. Janice, of all people. He clenched his fists, felt his shame boil into anger, and wanted to strike out. Hit something. Pat was such a shit. Todd had been such a fool. He should never have had sex with him, and by all means, he should never have let Pat tell him what to do later on. The frustration, the anger just popped. Todd pulled his leg back, looked for something, anything, and then, as hard as he could, kicked a side table, causing a lamp and a handful of magazines to crash to the floor. Todd! Screamed Janice, but her plea went unheard. Instead, Todd kicked the table 2 and 3 more times until one of the legs cracked, and then he started kicking the magazines, sending them flapping across the room like insane birds. God damn it all! He shouted as loud as he could. Stop it, Todd! Just stop it! His face seething, he turned to her. I saw the tears streaming down her cheeks. So how much had Pat actually told her? Not simply that they'd had sex, but everything? Half of him wanted Janice to know the entire truth about that night. Greg had died. Half of him was terrified that she already did. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.